The race for the 2023 general election in Nigeria continues to heat up. Leaders and stakeholders of the ruling All Progressives Congress, APC, particularly governors, ministers, and members of the National Assembly, are searching for a consensus candidate that would lead the party to the general election in 2023. With the February 26th National Convention of the party inching closer, the post of the national chairman of the party has taken the front burner with the consideration of former Minister of State for Mines and Steel, Bawa Buhari from Niger State, Saliu Mustafa from Kwara State, and Senator Tanko Amakura from Nasarawa State for the position. Meanwhile, following media reports that APC was considering fielding former President Goodluck Jonathan as its presidential candidate in 2023, the ruling party said defectors to the party, including Jonathan, would be given waiver to contest. Dr. Abati, do you have an exclusive you'd like to share on Arise News regarding Goodluck Jonathan in 2023?
No, I have no exclusive in that regard. I know what you're talking about, whether or not President Jonathan is going to throw his hat into the ring. Well, this story is not new. You will recall that before now, there have been speculations, there have been reports about certain APC governors visiting President Jonathan and appealing to him to get into the race and, do a second term. And of course, you'll recall also that there was a statement by his current spokesperson, Ikechukwu Eze, saying that there was no truth to it. But in politics, all kinds of things happen. All kinds of things happen. And that's why people say 24 hours is a very long time in politics. So, of course, if the president is under pressure, and this talk about President Jonathan being a likely consensus candidate, there are a number of issues involved. One, you have the example of President John Mahama in Ghana. President John Mahama in Ghana decided to run, a second time. He had followed the example of President Jonathan in giving up when he lost the election to Akufo-Addo. And now he came back, he didn't get it. Okay, he's not been damaged by that choice that he made. He continues to remain a statesman in Ghana. The question is, okay, would President Jonathan also be persuaded to follow that example? Two, how altruistic, is the motive of these persons who have been lobbying that President Jonathan should come back into the race? Most of them are from the north. These are the same elements who in 2010, 2011 said he could not be president of Nigeria after his former boss, President Umaru Yar'Adua, died. They said, it was the turn of the north. Jonathan could not succeed him. Only a northern. When it is expressly clear in the Constitution, Section 146 thereof, that in the event of the death of the president of Nigeria, the man that will take over will automatically be the vice president. At that time, there was this thing about doctrine of necessity, which was not necessary because the Constitution was clear. So now you have certain forces from the north turning around and saying, President Jonathan, will be the best person for Nigeria. So for him, what is that thing again? It will be like some kind of, victory for him, some kind of consolation that the rejected stone is the same stone now that some elements are calling to say they want to make the cornerstone of the building. The third issue here has to do with, they say they want to adopt President Jonathan as consensus candidate. Can President Jonathan himself just walk out of the PDP? You recall that it was the platform of the PDP, on that platform, that he made history. The only man in the history of Nigeria to have been a deputy governor, to have been an acting governor, to have been governor, to have been a vice president, acting president, and president of Nigeria. No other person from any part of this country has ever achieved that. And the first major man, who was able to represent the interests of the marginalized, ignored, abused people of the South at the highest level. Which leads me to the next point. Now, they are saying he's the best man for the job. Okay, it's some form of vindication for him, as I said earlier. But what is their motive? Many Nigerians are saying, okay, everybody is pushing for President Jonathan because they know, the North knows that he can only do 4 years. And yet this is the same man they accused in 2015, 2014, that, he had agreed that he will only do 1 term in office. So you see, there's a lot of hypocrisy involved. There's a lot of subterfuge involved. There is the national question involved. But at the end of the day, the decision is to be taken by President Jonathan. I'm not in a position to say this is the decision that he will take or the decision that he has taken. I mean, he's my boss. I work for him, So if he says this is what he wants, it will be a personal decision. But what I think, the major point that people are selling there is that President Buhari himself personally thinks that to succeed him and to move Nigeria forward, Nigeria needs a level-headed person. Nigeria needs a very humble person. Nigeria needs someone who understands the territory. Nigeria needs someone who will not go in there, and just, upturn the apple cart of Nigeria. He being a soldier, of course, would not want to preside over the disintegration of Nigeria, having fought to keep Nigeria one at some point in the course of his career as a military leader. So all of these speculations, they're just up there in the air. Nothing is cast in stone yet, but I think it's healthy within the public space that we're looking at persons, people are expressing their ideas, and whatever they bring to the table, your job, my job, is to evaluate it without being partisan in any way whatsoever. But we'll see what happens with the February 26th convention. The February 26th convention of the APC, 12 persons showed interest, all of them from the North. Now, and it was on the basis of that I said, well, it will look like the APC is more disposed, towards the idea of the presidential candidate in their party coming from the South. Okay? So if you link the two, all this talk about President Jonathan coming back and moving to the APC and all the issues that we have raised, well, you may say, well, perhaps, the APC is looking towards the South, while the PDP, on the other hand, seems to be looking towards the North or has an issue with where their candidate should come from. But we've been told they are looking at a consensus candidate for their convention, where incidentally, the proposed Electoral Act Amendment Bill, as re-amended, also gives the option of consensus. So who is that consensus chairman that is going to emerge? That's one question. The second question is, will the convention itself hold? With the fact that many factions within the party, APC members will say there are no factions, they just have disagreements. Well, there are factions. Mm-hmm. So if those factions go to court, what will the court determine? So all of this just shows us that the race for 2023 has started. There will be all kinds of tales, there will be all kinds of conspiracy theories. But at some point, we will know the direction of the general election. But what is important is that whatever happens, either in the APC or the PDP, the two dominant parties, and apologies that we're not talking about the other parties. These are the two dominant parties in Nigeria. APGA, the other party, doesn't quite play heavily at the national level. It's more of a regional political party. But whatever happens, everything should be put in place to make sure that the people of Nigeria make an informed choice and that democracy in 2023 is not determined by a cabal, by a group, by those who call themselves kingmakers, but by the people of Nigeria. You and I going to the polling booth to exercise our right to vote and our right to choose who we want.
That's what we pray for. Well, in other news, Attorney General of the Federation and Minister of Justice Abubakar Malami, SAN, yesterday disclosed that a prima facie case has been established against suspended Deputy Commissioner of Police, Abba Kyari, over allegations leveled against him by the United States government in the fraud case involving an internet fraudster, Ramon Abbas, popularly called Hush Puppy. Malami, who spoke during an interview on Channels Television, noted that multiple jurisdictions were involved in the matter, including the United Arab Emirates, America, and Nigeria. He added that though investigations were still ongoing, the possibility of extraditing the officer was high. The Attorney General also claimed that the number of convictions the administration had so far secured in the fight against corruption clearly established that a recent report by Transparency International had no basis. Well, I suppose this would be reassuring to a lot of people who were concerned at the lull. You'll recall when the Abba Kyari story broke, there was a lot of, it was quite frenzied. And next thing, radio silence. So this goes to show that, yes, investigations are still ongoing and the story is far from over. Those who have assumed that Abba Kyari is going to get away with what he's been accused of without being properly examined and prosecuted by a court, which will then decide to convict or acquit him, are shown now to be in error, now that the Attorney General has addressed it. And the Transparency International, it does rankle with the current administration, given their C agenda, which includes anti-corruption. But, this is what it is. Transparency International, if they had given a good report of Nigeria, the same federal government would have hailed it. And it's not enough to say these are the convictions that we've had. Nigeria continues to fall, and more work needs to be done in that regard. It's just quite clear to me. Your thoughts?
Okay. Take the EFCC, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, and even the Independent Corrupt Practices Commission, the ICPC. They were both set up in response to the fact that Nigeria is part of the international community. The Financial Action Task Force, during the years of President Obasanjo, put his feet down and said, look, Nigeria will be blacklisted if we did not set up those structures to investigate corrupt practices inside Nigeria. And hence, the Obasanjo administration went ahead and set up the EFCC. Originally, there was the Financial Intelligence Unit, which became more or less the EFCC and then the ICPC. In other words, the indication that is established again by Abba Kyari's case is that Nigeria is part of an international community. And the international community is governed by certain rules. We run a rules-based order. In other words, what you do can affect other parts of the world, and there are international institutions that insist that the protocols to which your country is signatory, you have to be, held accountable to it at various levels. I don't want to go into jargons in principles of international law. But as you said, it's reassuring that the Attorney General of the Federation, whose duty it is, to determine some of these things, to take a decision, to advise the government as the chief law officer of the Federation, has said now that, okay, a prima facie case has been established against Abba Kyari, the police officer. You recall that at the time, the issues raised against him is alleged association with Ramon Abbas, popularly known as Hush Puppy, generated a lot of views about the integrity of the Nigerian police. A committee was set up, it was sent on suspension. Okay. What is important in what the Attorney General has said is that there is a lot of international collaboration in this case, and that many jurisdictions are involved. But what all of us must be careful about is that a man is innocent until proven guilty.
Absolutely.
A prima facie case against a person does not establish guilt. No. But you get the impression in this country that if anybody's name is mentioned, and even when charges are preferred against an individual, it still does not mean that the court or counsel on both sides can prove the case. So I don't think anyone should engage in media trial by media. So even with the revelation by the Attorney General on whether there will be extradition and whether prima facie case has been established against this man once known as a super cop, it does not mean that he's guilty yet. And we have to respect his rights. But as part of the international rules-based system. If Nigeria decides to extradite him, it's not a problem. An investigation has been carried out, and anybody that has allegations against them and a prima facie case has been established should have their day in court. But it is important that justice is done. So I don't consider Abba Kyari guilty yet. We're not a court of law in the media. No. Okay? So everybody should have that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really important point. Well, that's all on the news headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Rota Sadiri, Adeswa Moran, to give us updates on African business and COVID-19 pandemic across the world. Stay with us. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Our dependable Rota Sadiri is here to give us an African business update. Good morning.
Good morning. Happy birthday.
On my birthday.
Happy, yes, February babies. It's a month of love and everything else. Doctor, good morning to you. Good morning. Yeah, so we begin with what we've, this fuel scarcity that's been hitting parts of Lagos, parts of Abuja, parts of Port Harcourt. According to This Day newspaper investigations, the report suggests that it's contaminated fuel that's been imported into the nation that has alarmed the NNPC and is causing them to call for a withdrawal, a recall, if you will. That marketers shouldn't sell it because, according to anecdotal evidence, it's damaging some engines of some folks' vehicles. Now, This Day reached out to NNPC. Even I, on my part, tried to get through to the corporate comms folks. They haven't, confirmed this. But according to unnamed sources in the downstream sector, apparently it's higher amounts of ethanol and that's in
methanol.
And methanol. That's in the contaminated fuel. I think even higher grades of sulfur and so on. That's in there. That's causing them to make the recall. But they haven't made an announcement, and this has been happening since since Saturday. This is Awolowo Road here in Ikoyi, parts of Lekki, Ojodu Bega, Bagada, Alikbere, Oshodi Apapa axis, Ajah, Shangotedo, and it's causing transportation players to take advantage. A bus ride from Ajah to CMS, I think it's about 400 naira is what it goes for. But in the last few days, they've hiked it to like 1,000 naira, right? So they're taking advantage. Now, there's also some whispers of hoarding taking place with respect to some of these retailers in the downstream space. But this is what you get when you only have one entity that is a sole supplier of petroleum products. Now, in addition to this, there's another issue. The National Association of Road Transport Owners, they are saying that they might be forced to withdraw their services because of the increased cost of diesel. So get this, when you think about the pricing templates of fuel, you've got your landing cost, you've got your wholesale margins, you've got your distribution margins as well. The road transports, the NARTO, the National Association of Road Transport Owners, they've got the tankers. They transport fuel across the country, but their trucks run on diesel, and diesel is at anywhere from about 410 to 430 naira per liter. Diesel, by the way, is unregulated. Now, when you look at the templates, according to the PPPRA, which hasn't published anything in a while, but for our viewers, that's the Petroleum Products Pricing Regulatory Agency. When you think about the templates, as part of the distribution margins, the cost of moving fuel up and down, there are freight costs, all right? And those freight costs are paid to these haulage transport owners in arrears. So they're not paid up front by the government. The government, there was a stakeholders meeting that they had earlier this month or late in December. They said last year the federal government paid about 52 billion naira in bridging costs to transport haulers and so on. So it is paid in arrears. So imagine this: you are a fuel tanker. You're carrying fuel up and down the country. When you go to buy fuel to fuel your tanker, you are met with rising costs of diesel, and you are not made whole by the federal government on too much of this. So they're saying that because of the high costs of diesel, they're going to have to just park their tankers and not be able to supply until the government raises those freight charges, and those freight charges are capped. Which is kind of ironic when you think about the fact that when you bring in the subsidy matter into the situation, PMS is capped, but because of the unregulated cost of diesel that is rising, it filters into the upfront costs for these tanker owners, and so they might not be able to complete their operations. So everything is just, it's messy, and in fact, let me even move on to our next story because this is kind of linked to this. The IMF released their Article 4 consultation papers for Nigeria just yesterday, or late yesterday, where they said that debt service for Nigeria is going to hit 92% debt service, on our interest costs. As of September 2020, or rather September 2021, debt service to revenue was 76%. Now, which is 76 kobo out of every naira in revenue. So if you link this back to our fuel issues, the sheer weight and burden of what Nigeria is paying for fuel subsidy is literally eating into our revenues. And the only way to bridge that gap is to borrow more money, which now leads to interest costs, which now pushes up your debt service to revenue. By the way, the US is looking at raising interest rates. 4 rate hikes is what is being priced in. The euro, I know Christine Lagarde said that the Eurozone, the European Central Bank might not do it, but they might do it later, Bank of England. So you are in an environment now, as in Nigeria, where because you just simply want to keep this subsidy in place, you are faced with having to go back to the international markets to possibly borrow, and interest rates are going to rise, which means your debt servicing is going to climb even further. So this subsidy matter really has to be addressed, and all these these price caps up and down, they are a problem because somebody has to foot the bill.
But it's not going to be addressed, not for another 18 months. That much we know. So in the life of this administration, that's really that. It's been kicked down the road for the next person.
Yet again, which is a problem.
Yeah.
It's a big problem.
Okay, first, many Nigerians were surprised when they woke up Monday morning only to discover that fuel queues had shown up, because we thought this was a problem that had been addressed by the Jonathan administration, and that the Buhari administration had made every effort to prevent. But in this case, we were told that the problem is as a result of contaminated fuel being withdrawn. So it's a supply problem, a supply gap problem. But again, we should know that it was not nationwide. Even in Lagos, it's not the whole of Lagos that was affected. There were parts of Lagos where there were no fuel queues. But in the affected places, it's only to be expected that there will be a lot of panic. Now, some of the people commenting on it say, it's because it's NNPC that has that monopoly. But the truth of the matter is that, the NNPC moved swiftly and stopped about 100 million liters, we're told, of petrol. If you have used contaminated fuel before, what some people call bad fuel, it destroys cars. So you look at it also in terms of cost and the speed with which, the bad fuel supply was withdrawn. Once upon a time in this country, you could buy fuel, a whole tank. When you go there the following morning, it's water that you will find inside your tank. And vehicles were just packing up again and again. So the swift withdrawal of the contaminated fuel with high degree of ethanol and methanol, I think, that to me makes sense. However, this is again under the direct sale, direct purchase program. Okay, is there failure in that respect? Is there, lack of vigilance, due diligence in checking whatever fuel is brought into the country under the direct sale, direct purchase program? But this has happened for more than 24 hours in the affected places. Okay, what measures are in place to address this? How swiftly is the NNPC and its relevant departments moving to liaise with the independent marketers? But the other leg of the problem is that some people have argued that, in fact, the scarcity may be artificial. Because of the uncertainty that existed about the subsidy regime. Many of these independent marketers were already hoarding fuel, hoping that, there will be a complete removal of subsidy, but it didn't happen. Okay, what is I think it's the weights and measures department What are they doing to make sure that some of these owners of the filling stations are not engaging sharp practices to make quick profit? Because anytime you create a scarcity, whether there's an explanation for it or it's artificial, it's these marketers that make money. And that in itself amounts to economic sabotage. Yeah. So what are we dealing with here? Is it a combination of supply problem and sabotage on the part of people who want to profit from the people's discomfort? Now, as for IMF saying that Nigeria is going to service debt under the 2022 budget to the tune of about 92%. Okay, if that is the case, then what is left for development purposes?
It's just...
So it's bad news because it means, okay, maybe we'll borrow more, right? On all fronts, it's bad news. It will mean also that even recurrent expenditure, capital expenditure, will suffer. The scope of deficit will be further widened. So, but this is a perennial problem about accumulation of debts. And then there was this point you raised about NATO.
Yes, the road transport owners.
National Association of Road Transport Owners. Yeah. Now, you recall that diesel and kerosene, they were deregulated a long time ago. So what are these road transport owners, what are they asking for? Are they asking for their own subsidy?
Well,
in terms of landing costs and other costs. Okay, so this is the kind of situation you get when there is no refinement in terms of policy articulation. And NATO is now threatening, they will down tools, they will withdraw their trucks. So even people who rely on diesel will not be able to have access to it. Now it's about 430 naira. The cost of diesel just went up gradually.
Right.
And in the absence of regular supply of electricity, households have had to spend more to have, electricity supply in their homes. Well, my recommendation would be that the relevant authorities in government, particularly the downstream and the upstream regulatory authority, which is the new body that has been put in place. Although when you suspend the Petroleum Industry Act that creates some of these bodies, you have a contradiction on your hands. But what is important is whatever relevant authority that has not been suspended, or that is still in existence, should engage at all of these levels with the independent marketers and also with these road transport owners who I don't want to accuse of making a great effort to blackmail government.
Yeah, are we out of time?
I'm not sure.
Okay, no, good. Very quick point. Yesterday you were talking about the reports that the NNPC is looking at acquiring, I think it was assets from either Chevron or one of the international IOCs.
Shell and ExxonMobil.
Yes. You had a great guest on yesterday who made this excellent analogy of how news is disseminated in Nigeria. When Mr. Emmanuel Efeni comes on and you go to the newspaper review, This Day newspaper, Vanguard, they're all private. News, imagine if news was disseminated through the federal government, right? The issue here with the oil, with what we're seeing with fuel costs, is that the NNPC cannot continue to be the sole provider of supply into the nation. The marketers that could possibly be accused of economic sabotage and so on and so forth, if you completely deregulate the downstream sector, you eliminate that opportunity and incentive. Monopoly. You remove it completely, and then you're allowing different players to bring fuel into. So, I mean, you can see how this is just multiplying and becoming a bigger problem from NATO to fuel and everything else. I don't know how much longer the federal government can kick the can down the road, as you've mentioned earlier, but this pressure point is just building and building and building, and it simply has to. Free markets have to prevail.
But isn't that why much hope is invested in the Dangote refinery that is supposed to do 650,000 barrels per day?
Right. Is he going to sell? Look, Dangote is a private player, and I mean there've already been discussions and analysis of what he could possibly sell fuel at. My guess is he's a private player, so it's going. I don't know if folks should really.
Maybe that will address the supply problem.
It will address the supply problem, but if you look at where oil prices are, well, Goldman is saying it could. Someone said it could touch $100 per barrel this year. Dangote Refinery is coming on stream in September. I don't want too many people to put hopes in the fact that yes, supply will be increased 650,000 barrels per day versus 450 for the other refineries that have comatose. He's a private sector player and would want his costs to be covered by what his retail price of fuel that's sold. So as much as, yes, we can put a lot of hope, it's going to be a game changer for the nation. Capitalism reigns supreme and profit is what matters. So market prices is going to dictate, market forces are going to dictate what, downstream petroleum products should be sold at, as we're seeing with diesel, as we're seeing with kerosene right now.
Policy misalignment.
Yes, sir.
Nigeria has just postponed the evil day by suspending the PIA for 18 months.
We're still going to meet this problem.
So the next government, this time, next year, we'll be having the same matter. Thank you, Rotus.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you very much.
For an update on the COVID-19 pandemic, Adeswa Omoran is here with us. Good morning, Adeswa.
Good morning, Tundu, and congratulations. You have survived another trip around the sun despite the COVID-19 pandemic. I wish you a day as special as you are. Good morning, Dr. Bati.
Good morning,
Thank you, Adeswa. Thank you so much.
I said, Adeswa, you will miss the implications.
Well, let's talk.
I know.
We will take care of the implications on your behalf.
It's just about 55 minutes away.
Okay.
By flight. So I can't be there.
Okay. What do you have for us this morning?
All right, guys. Let's talk about the pandemic. Yes. We begin with the statistics as we normally would do on this segment. We do know that over 900,000 people have now died from COVID-19, especially fueled by the Omicron variant in the United States, which is the most impacted country when it comes to figures of infections and deaths. And yesterday, Democratic leaders in Congress held a moment of silence to commemorate the American lives that have been lost to the pandemic so far. In the last 24 hours, however, we've seen countries lifting restrictions while others are tightening those restrictions or tightening the curbs as infections are rising. Such countries as Indonesia have now, tightened COVID-19 curbs in the country. Some others are making sure their COVID passports are used in super spreader events, so you have to be vaccinated before you can access such public spaces. Well, here in Nigeria, we've seen a decrease in cases. It's more like a yo-yo movement. Yesterday, we saw 53 new infections and thankfully no COVID-19 deaths in the latest data released by the NCDC. That data came from 10 states. However, we did not see data from Lagos State, which is the epicenter in Nigeria, as well as the Federal Capital Territory here in Abuja, which is the second most affected when it comes to those numbers coming in for COVID-19. Well, the days of COVID-19 vaccine unavailability in Nigeria may have come to an end. And this is because the country continues to receive donations from different parts of the world or its purchased doses. Yesterday, the federal government took delivery of almost 2 million doses of such, this time around for the single-dose Johnson & Johnson vaccine from the European Union, from the European Union. The handover of the 1.936 million vaccine doses took place at the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, the National Strategic Cold Store in the nation's capital. The executive director for the NPHCDA, Dr. Faisal Shuaibu, said the federal government also, like I said, in combating this pandemic, has procured over 39 million doses of the same vaccine, the J&J vaccine. And he says these will be prioritized for the hard-to-reach areas because it's a single dose. It makes perfect sense. We do hear that the shelf life for this vaccine it's over a year, almost 2 years. And so it makes sense that this will only be prioritized to those hard-to-reach areas. He had to make this point and emphasize it because there are those who think that some vaccines have been kept aside for special people, or the VIPs, like we like to call them in Nigeria. He says this is not the case. The reason the J&J is not available to everybody is because they have kept it for this singular reason. They had to reach areas, areas where you have conflict, areas, riverine areas where, you know, you are not likely to go back 3 weeks or 6 weeks after to administer a second dose. Away from Nigeria, truckers in the Canadian capital of Ottawa are vying to continue their protest despite a state of emergency imposed by the mayor and frustration and anger from residents. And a court in Canada has now banned the truckers from sounding their horns as part of a crackdown on the 11th day, which is actually the 12th day today, 12-day long anti-government protest in the country. Away from that, police had to help Labour leader Keir Starmer yesterday escape from protesters who surrounded him near Parliament. A group could be heard shouting traitor and criticizing Keir Starmer's record on COVID, and there were some other cries of Jim Savile. 2 people we hear have been arrested. Reports suggest that the protest in Westminster was an attempt to replicate the Freedom Convoy in Canada. However, unlike the protests in Canada, in UK, the rally was very small. Familiar faces from anti-vaccine protests in the past were on the protest ground yesterday, and they were lightly quiet until they saw Labour leader Keir Starmer approach. And finally, Australia has chosen February 21st to reopen its border to all vaccinated tourists and business travelers. Australia imposed one of the world's strictest, or one of the world's toughest travel restrictions to limit the COVID pandemic. And permanent residents actually in March 2020 were stopped from coming into the country, as well as its own citizens. Well, in November last year, it sort of relaxed the measures, allowing some people, including international students and skilled migrants, it prioritized those groups over tourists to come back to the country. But now it's saying, you can all come. We are open. Back to you guys.
Well, very much as long as they are vaccinated. Australia's policy just shows
Fully
that...
vaccinated.
Yes, it just shows that the world is slowly coming out of the ordeal that was the COVID pandemic. You know how draconian their laws were. I think really second only to China. For a democracy, they really took it far in terms of their lockdowns, in terms of social distancing policies, in terms of tourism. It was extremely strict. So it says a lot that they're finally opening their doors to the vaccinated. As for the Keir Starmer story, thank goodness the police were there. If not, there clearly would have been some violence done against him and David Lammy, for sure. That was a really irate mob. And we now understand, you know, Dr. Abati was joking about Justin Trudeau, you know, beating a retreat in Canada. We now see why he did.
Yeah.
These people are prepared to do violence to politicians that they disagree with. This is how uncivil this argument is. Why does your conviction about, you know, COVID-19 vaccines, government policies have to result in that kind of behavior? And they've really made the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, look as bad as he deserves, quite frankly, with that careless jibe that he threw at Keir Starmer, causing one of his closest aides, Munira Mazir, I believe her name is, to resign in horror that he would use the heinous crimes committed by Jimmy Savile, which many people have still not healed from. I'm included. I used to watch Jimmy Savile as a child. I thought he was an angel, only to find out that he was a sex offender of the most, you know, egregious kind. And he just threw that out as somebody as an accusation. And the fact that that was said by that mob, if the mob had just focused on their freedoms, it wouldn't have been as toxic. But the fact that they're using the insults that Boris Johnson threw at Keir Starmer as well and parroting that just shows how reckless Boris Johnson's words were, and that really words matter. We have to be very careful what we say. Slander sticks. Even though there have been resignations, even though the Prime Minister has been rebuked, you know, from left, right, and center, in some people's minds, Keir Starmer is now some kind of pedophile apologist, which is extremely unfair.
Okay, let's start with the UK and the attack on, let's use the word attack, on Sir Keir Starmer. I think the man that is in the eye of the storm really is Boris Johnson. And there are many parliamentarians who have called for, you know, a vote of no confidence in him. And the number has increased since this attack on Sakes Tama. And you recall that the staff that left, that resigned, had urged the Prime Minister to apologize. Today in the UK, more people are insisting that Boris Johnson needs to take back his words. That slur, that Jimmy Savile slur, projecting Sakes Tama as a supporter of, pedophiles. And the whole point is that, look, what is said on the floor of Parliament, while you can classify it under parliamentary privilege, if it goes out there, it can also, influence other people's behavior. And this is where most of the, even the Tory, members of Parliament, where they stand. Yes, it may have been Prime Minister question time, privileged speech in Parliament, but you have to watch what you say. Now, Prime Minister Boris Johnson himself, when this incident occurred on Monday, that's yesterday, he issued a statement, more or less, condemning the assault on the person and integrity of Sakes Tama. But the main issue now is that he does not go far enough, that he has to come out and take back his words, and this is all about leadership and responsibility. So he just adds to Boris Johnson's woes. Now, in Canada, yesterday I brought up this issue of Canada. I think there are two dimensions that we still need to look at. The New Democratic Party, the leader of the New Democratic Party, is saying that this is no longer about vaccine requirement, that this is an attempt to overthrow the government, what they call the Freedom Convoy, which is a phrase that was also used by those who, made an attempt on Sakes Tama, in the UK. That, look, this is an attempt to overthrow the government. The second concern is about international involvement. Donald Trump and some other, Republicans across the border have been supporting these truckers who have held the capital hostage. And the thing has spread, as I said yesterday, to Toronto, to Quebec, to Winnipeg, to Ontario, to other parts of Canada. In Ottawa, the mayor has asked us to declare an emergency, and persons have been arrested. And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he and his family, they are still in hiding. So when will this end? What it means, the example in Canada, in also the UK, is that these anti-vaxxers, one, constitute a minority, but they are a very powerful minority that seem to be forming, an international coalition, and they have people like Djokovic, who we are now told is planning to take the vaccine so that he will be able to continue with his career and also probably win his own 21st Grand Slam. So these are the various dimensions to this particular matter. As for Australia, yes. Australia is one of those countries in the Asia Pacific that imposed very heavy restrictions. 2 years, since March 2020, Australia had shut its borders against outsiders and even its own citizens abroad, resulting in the separation of families and reduction in activity. So Australia adopted a COVID-0 policy. But now, in line with what is happening in the Asia Pacific, in the Philippines, for example, in New Zealand, to some extent, that's spaced out in 5 phases. So Australia now says fully vaccinated persons can come in, despite Omicron. But all those countries that are opening up need to be reminded that word of caution from the WHO Director General, Tedros Ghebreyesus, that as countries try to open up, they must know that the virus has not yet disappeared, and that there's a lot more that needs to be done beyond vaccines. This is his major point, that vaccination alone is not enough. Finally, in Nigeria, yes, we thank the European Union for giving us 2 million, about 2 million, 1.96, you said, doses. Nigeria before now had acquired about 39 million through Afreximbank and the African Union COVAX program, giving us a total of about 41 million. But generally, I'm concerned about what Dr. Shayo, Professor Shayo, said about the rate of vaccination in the country. He says about 14.1% of the eligible population, which is about 111 plus million, have been vaccinated. And just about 6 million persons have taken the 2 doses. About 549,000 have taken the booster dose. And somewhere in his presentation, he was jubilating that, look, the number of vaccinated persons in Nigeria, even if we have not met the target of 50% of the eligible population by January 31st, is something that we have to look at in relative terms, because the population of persons who have been vaccinated is even more than the population of some of the countries that we compare Nigeria with. Well, I think that's a bit ingenuous. I think that will not be an excuse not to roll out, more vaccines and to focus more on this public health crisis that the entire international community is facing. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is reserved for the hard-to-reach areas, riverine areas, desert areas, and all of that. But Nigeria just needs to focus and continue to do a lot more. And it's good that the MPACDA and their development partners are going around the country. They were in Enugu State, February 3, February 4, to further conscientize the people. And Dr. Shaib reserved a whole paragraph for journalists. He says every journalist should show example and go and get vaccinated. And he says we should report truthful information, and that we should also report any fraudulent activity that we see around the vaccination program. I was thoroughly amused. It was the longest paragraph in his speech. So everybody likes to give a lecture to journalists. Everybody is a media expert. But that's fine, to define the responsibility of the media to report truthfully, But they too must play their part. I think so. Those who give lectures to journalists should also play their part and search their conscience. Thank you.